Welcome everyone. In this series I'm going to do 4 brief and introductory Photoshop tutorials for beginners of Photoshop, and then show you how to set up these images in an InDesign presentation. That will be the 5th and final tutorial or demo in this series. So leading off, we're going to focus on a particular task. The task will center around manipulating this image of a sealed door, which I'm opening in Photoshop. We want to keep in mind that Photoshop is a program that works with pixels or raster images, and you can sort of get a sense for that if you zoom as far in as you possibly can to the information, the graphic information that exists on this page. And this is relevant particularly to those of you who might be working together with Photoshop in programs like InDesign or Illustrator that work with vectors. But I'll get into that a little bit later to show you an example of what I mean and how that sort of works when we talk about InDesign. So what I want to do with this image is a couple of things. I'm going to cut out the wall. I'm going to show you how to cut out this central part of the wall here, so just there in the middle, and replace it with something else. So we're imagining we want to turn this this wall into a door, and it's the most basic functions of Photoshop are to be able to use the selection tools very well. So let's try this. So first of all, we've got up here marquee tools that allow us to do selections with a rectangle. So let's say I wanted to select, this looks close enough to a rectangle to me, I want to select this part of the wall and maybe delete it. That's pretty good. That gets me most of it, but I'm still missing a piece up here. If I delete this part of the image, it will ask me what I want to put behind, and automatically blend in existing data from the image. Instead of that, what I'd like to do is for the image to become hollow, for it to be deleted, let's say for there to be a hole in it. So I'm going to go up here to my layers. This is where all my layers in Photoshop exist, and I'm going to create a layer from this background. We don't need it to have a color. Layer 0 we'll call it. Actually, let's retitle it and call it base image. So now that means with this selection, which is still active, that I'm selecting on this particular layer. It's the only one there. And if I delete it this time, it will show me the new background, which is the sort of default checkered pattern that Photoshop uses. So again, that's pretty good. That allows us to cut out most of this piece. But what if I want to cut out that pointed part of the arch? Well, I can leave this selected. So I can leave this piece selected, and I'll go ahead and Control Z undo what I did before, and add other selection, use other selection tools to add to the area that I'm selecting. So I'm going to go up here to this group of tools. The lasso tools are very useful. So for example, this particular lasso tool will allow me to select based on the movements of my mouse. Now, the way that I want to add to this selection or delete from this selection is using Shift or Alt. So if I hold Shift and then click, it will begin to add to my selection. So look, here I am making an area, and as soon as I complete my rounds or if I let go of the mouse button, like I'm about to do, bop, I let go of the mouse button, it will add the selection I've just made to the selection below. If I want to delete this new selection, I hold Alt, and you'll notice the little minus sign next to the lasso tool. Any area that I select now, that I held Alt and then clicked on the mouse, and I'm still holding the left mouse button down, any area that I select now will be deleted. So this should all go away. Bop. Well, that's pretty nice. Let's say I hold Shift and I want to add that new area that we were taking a look at. I could try that with the mouse. Let's give it a try. It's probably not going to be very good though. Oh, it's terrible. That didn't really come out the way I wanted. So I Control Z to go back to the original selection that I had made. And I'm going to try another tool. I could try the magnetic lasso tool. And this will, if I hold Shift here, I'm telling the magnetic lasso tool to add to the selection I have already, and I'm about to click the mouse. It will try to find the highest contrast in the area that I'm still holding the left mouse button. It'll try to find the highest contrast and sort of help me out, let's say, as I trace a line. It's still not very accurate, but it's not bad. And if I release the mouse button, it'll... Oh, I'm going to just complete the circle. That's okay. That's not so bad. My preferred method of completing this would be, and to do it accurately, would be to go to zoom in a little bit and use the polygonal lasso tool, which allows you to make a sequence of straight lines, and that's good enough for us. So I'm going to hold Shift here, I'm going to click, and I'm going to trace this curve. And the shorter of the distance I make between each of these points, the more accurate my curve is. So here we go. I'm tracing. And I'm completing the loop there. So that's pretty good. What if I had accidentally clicked out of the selection area? What a disaster. I could undo that in some sense by using, instead of Shift, which adds that little plus sign next to the lasso, I could hold Alt and subtract from the selection I've made. So I could go here, and that will remove, there's a little divot there I don't like, so I'm holding Alt again and then clicking the left mouse button to unselect that part of the total selection. So I've got the selection that I want, that's the middle part of this wall, and I want to remove it. Before I do that, since I like the idea of keeping multiple layers, before I remove that selection, I want you to call your attention to the different layers we have here. I'm going to duplicate this layer so that we have this base image in the background while we're working, in case we want to come back to it for whatever reason. Maybe we want that wall to make a reappearance a little later on. So I'm going to duplicate layer. I right click here on the layer that I'm on, and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to click OK. That gives me a copy. So let's call this base image 1 and base image 2. And now whichever image I select is whichever layer I select is the active one. So here I'm active on base image 2, and I'm going to click delete in order to delete the middle part of this wall. So I click delete. Oh my goodness, nothing happened. What happened was that in the base image 2, that portion of the wall was deleted, but this base image 1 is still active. So there are two layers here, and the original image is preventing me from seeing through the second version of the base image. So I'm going to use this eyeball here. I'm going to click the eyeball and turn it off. So now I'm only seeing this layer, base image 2. And as you can see, I've cut a hole in it. So that's great. We have a hole now. Another thing that you could do with your selection tool, and this is quite valuable, is you can go up to Selection, and we may use this later on, and these are just some different functions you might consider using. You can click Inverse. That will inverse the selection of everything on the image. So instead of selecting the central door, I've now selected everything else in the image. So if I were to click Delete, for example, it would remove everything. Another thing that I might do, and right now I've gone back, I'm using Control-Z to toggle back to where I was before as I'm working. Now I have the central piece here selected still. I could potentially save this selection. And this might be useful later on. So let's call this, let's say, door opening. Or let's call it portal. So that if, for example, and I've turned off base image 2 and turned the base image 1 on, as if I've gone back to the beginning. If I, for example, were here, and now I'm thinking, darn it, I have to do this whole thing again. No, we can go up to Select. We can click Load Selection. And in the channel options, we've got Portal, which is the selection we had made before. So if I click OK here, it will reload the portal selection that I made before. And that's quite useful if I'm doing, maybe not for this sort of easy geometry, but if I'm selecting out a very complex geometry, and I've done all this work of going around someone's hair, or you know, I've really gone into, I've really created a complicated shape, then whether I'm going to use it again in the future, I'm absolutely going to select it so that I'm not depending on my undo key, you know, Control-Z all the time. So that's quite a useful function. Anyway, where were we? We had already cut a hole in the doorway, and if I click out, right now you notice that the marquee tool, which is up here in the top right, is active. The selection is made, and it's active as well. So in order to deactivate it, if I click outside, anywhere outside the selection area, then the selection will go away, will disappear. So the default move tool is going to help me sort of stay in a neutral state. If I were to click the image now and move the image, well, anyway, if I click the image and move my mouse, then the image moves. But what I want to do instead is I want to bring in a kind of, let's say a background into this doorway. I want to be able to see through this doorway into a landscape. So I'm going to open up another image. Let's go with the sunset here. Oh, it's a lovely one. I'm going to take my marquee tool and I'm going to select the whole thing, okay, which was just dropping, selecting, let's say left clicking with the mouse top left and then dragging all the way across the image. I'm going to click Control-C for copy. You could also come up here to Edit and click Copy. I'm going to go to my other file here and I'm going to click Control-V, or I could come up here to Paste. Alright, this created a new layer, which you can see here on the right hand side. And we're going to call this layer Sunset. Well, we have a problem because the sunset, first of all, isn't the right size, and it's not in the right place. We want it to be behind the portal. Well, basically, these layers on the right side here are stacked. So if I take the sunset and I left-click and then move it down below the base image that I'm working with, it'll put the sunset behind exactly where I want it to be. So now if I start to click and move on the image, and you remember I have this move tool selected in my tools in the top right. If I click on the image and I start to move it around, I can relocate it maybe to where I want it to be. That's pretty cool, but I'd rather that it be a bit bigger so that it fills up the whole portal that I've created. What I'm going to do, and you can access different tools in different ways. I've been using Photoshop so long that I have my own shortcuts sort of memorized. My preferred way of scaling is to use Control-T, which allows you to transform an image, in other words, to be able to scale it. And Photoshop, now the newer versions of Photoshop, when you click on a corner of an image and you drag it, it will scale it proportionally. Now if I were to hold Shift and while I click and drag the corner, then it will allow me to distort the image non-proportionally. So it's not going to keep, in other words, the same proportions of height and width of the image. So I'm going to click Control-Z so it goes back to where it was. You could also find the Control-T option in Edit, Free Transform. That's what I'm using right now. So again, these functions are accessible by shortcuts. They're accessible through the menu at the top, and also using your tools on the right-hand side. I think this one is a frame tool. Somewhere over here there might be a transform tool. Anyway, we'll leave that for now. What I want to do is scale this layer. So I've selected sunset, and I want to scale this image that's on this layer, the sunset, up to the right size. So let's try this. I'm moving it around. Oh, it's an epic one, this one, yeah. All right, I'm going to press Enter to complete the transformation. Maybe the sun is, let's say, a little bit to the left, and I didn't quite like that, and I can't quite get it to go in the middle. One of the more exact, let's say, functions you could use is to use your arrow keys on the keyboard, and that will move it pixel by pixel, which is quite useful to getting, let's say, a more precise, movement of your image when the move tool is selected. So that looks pretty good to me. What else do we have here? So we've got the sunset behind our wall, and that looks pretty good. How about we, instead of a wall, instead of the sunset in a view, wonderful view, what if we use we fill that up with a gate, so we make it a closed image. Well, I'm going to save this sunset out. Let's make a folder for this. I'm going to save this out as a Photoshop file, and I'm going to call this sunset door. I did that quite quickly, so I'll tell you again. Save as, and I chose a folder for the destination. I could have chosen a variety of file types. So I could save it out as a JPEG, which would flatten the image. In other words, not keep all this great information we have about different layers. I could have saved it out as a PDF, which is also a common file type, but I'm going to save it out as a PSD because when we use it, when we import this or link this image to our InDesign presentation, it can remain as a PSD. It doesn't have to be a JPEG or a PDF. We can use the Photoshop file. All right, so I saved the sunset door. I'm going to turn the sunset off because what we want to do now is bring this gate pattern into our other image. So let's say instead of a sunset behind this door, we want to have this closed gate. All right, let's give this a try. Well, first things first, what I need to do is select the stuff that I want from this image in order to copy and paste it over to the other image. So now we're master selection artists. I don't think this actually needs to be too precise. If I were to be precise, I would zoom in here. If let's say I wanted to get the exact profile of this portal, then I would maybe start off with this straight line. I don't have to click Shift in the beginning. When you first start using the tool, it will automatically create a selection. There's nothing to add to or subtract from. So I kind of like this. But here it starts to get a bit tricky for me. I'm thinking, there's actually quite a lot of contrast there. Maybe another tool would help me a bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of cut my losses and complete my selection of the bottom part of this door by hand. By hand, anyway. Everything is by hand here. I mean using the polygonal lasso tool. All right, that's not bad. Let's use another tool here. Let's try the magnetic lasso tool. All right. So I'm going to click Shift, and I'm going to have it start. I'm going to try to follow with my mouse along the edge here as close as possible, and you'll notice that it's sort of clicking for me, basically. All right, that's pretty good. If I were to continue moving my mouse up, the Photoshop would reorient us higher, which is what I want. The problem is it will affect the selection tool. So I'm going to go here, out here, and then complete the selection. So we're doing it in pieces a little bit. And then I'm going to click Shift again. We still have the magnetic lasso tool selected. I'm going to click Shift again. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start tracing around. Ooh, I made a little mistake there. I'm going to keep that in mind and come back and manually add that back in to our selection. All right, we're doing a pretty good job here. That's not bad. Not bad at all. All right. Let's go ahead and make a mistake. There we go. Oh, I made two mistakes. Alrighty. I'm going to click here, as I said, because if I use the mouse to scroll down, it won't work very well with the magnetic lasso tool. I'm continuing what I did before. I had Shift held when I clicked to activate the magnetic lasso tool, and that's adding to my original selection. So I just keep adding and adding. All right, I'm closing the loop here. And that's pretty good. Well, I mean, I'm missing this big section in the middle. It looks like I can bound it with a rectangle. So I'm gonna select the rectangular marquee tool in the top right here. I'm gonna click Shift so that it's adding to the selection I already have. And there we go. I selected the whole thing. And then I'm gonna zoom in here to locations that I'm not quite happy with because I sort of made a mistake here. But it was more important that I continued than sort of scrap the whole all the progress I had made up until that point. So I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool, and I'm going to subtract this piece and this piece from my selection. So subtracting means holding Alt and then clicking, and everything I select will now get subtracted from the selection. So there we go. I'm nixing that. I'm going to do minus here again. I'm holding Alt. I just click the mouse key. Once I've clicked the mouse key, I can let go of Alt. I don't have to have my thumb on the button. So I'm removing this piece of the selection. All right, it's gone. And I remember I wanted to add this little piece here. We already have the polygonal lasso tool selected. So in this case, I'm adding. So I'm going to click Shift, click anywhere here. All right, so I can remove my finger from the Shift key, and I'm going to add that little piece here. Bop, bop, bop. There we go. Not bad. Well, this is a case where if I were to come back to this image, I might want to use this selection again. So I'm going to go up here to select. I'm going to click Save Selection, and I'm going to give this a name. So let's call it, anyway, we'll call it Portal 2. OK. And this way, if let's say I have the marquee tool selected, and I accidentally click out of this, and my Control-Z buttons stop working. A disaster scenario. I don't know, the cat spills milk on the keyboard, and there it goes. I can come back to Select, Load Selection. There's Portal 2 selected, and whew, we got our selection back. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click Control-C. Now that I have this part of the door selected, Control-C, and I'm going to bring that into our original image, the file we've been working with. So I'm going to do Control-V, which is paste. So I copied, and now I'm pasting. And you'll notice it's pasting behind the base image, which is great. That's exactly where we want it. So it pasted, and now I can move it around. So let's say we put it just there. That's not bad. I think it could be a bit smaller, so I'm going to click Control-T and scale it down a little bit. We could also try and see what happens if we were to bring the sides in, either of the left and right sides. Well, if I try to do that, it'll scale proportionally, we remember. So what I need to do is hold Shift while I stretch it in a little bit. What I quite like about this, bringing it in, is the idea. I'm holding Shift now, by the way, while I make these transformations. The idea that I like here is that it sort of maybe brings in a bit of the shadow from the original image to give a sense of depth to this door. So we want to be a little bit conscientious of the effect that this image is having. So let's move it a little up here. Well, that's not bad. Yeah, it looks like a functioning door now as opposed to a bricked up opening. All right, so I'm going to save this out as is. All right, so this one is a gated door. Let's call this one gated door. I'm going to leave it as a Photoshop file. Remember, we could have selected from a number of these, but this will be Photoshop file, PSD, gated door. Okay, and the last thing I want to do here is something a little bit more creative with this opening. Let's make a space door. So let's go ahead and open up our... These are images that I found on different free, rights-free image sites. So here's a space image of space of a galaxy. It's a big one, so I'm gonna, just to refresh our memories here, I'm gonna go up to the marquee tool, the rectangular tool, since this is a rectangular shape I'm trying to create. I'm gonna So I'm going to click left mouse click top left and drag all the way across so I can select the full image. I'm going to go back to my other gated door file, and I'm going to click Control V. So that will add this giant space image behind my door opening here. So I'm going to Control T. I'm going to transform. I'm going to scale it a bit to try and get the sort of juicier aspects of this image. Let's see what we got here. All right, that kind of looks like space. I clicked Enter to stop the transformation. Let's put it just there. It's beautiful. I wanted to put now a man sitting, looking out over the galaxy here. So that means we need a person. We need that man. Well, here I've got an image of a guy sitting on the beach, looking out over the sunset. We can give that a try. What we need to do then is to cut this person out of this image and move him to the other image. This image is a bit trickier because you'll see that the outline of this person is maybe not in every location very high contrast. So I'm gonna try to do a selection of the person with the magnetic lasso tool. So let's start off with that. Let's say down here where I'm noticing there's quite a lot of contrast. All right, this is working pretty well. You can still click with the magnetic lasso tool. So I saw a little corner there and I really wanted to make sure that it put a node there, and I clicked. All right. And I'm not sure this is going to do it for me. Let's see. All right, it's got his ear. All right, that's pretty good. I'm going to, palms are sweaty, mom's spaghetti. I'm a bit nervous. I'm gonna close this. I want to keep this part of the selection. All right, so I can keep going here and keep adding to this. Let's try, I'll just go ahead and start over here. I'm holding Shift to add, and I'm clicking in a high contrast part. I'm going to go up the leg. All right, I want a node there definitely, so I'm clicking while using the magnetic lasso tool. I'm no longer holding the Shift button. I only needed to hold that when I first clicked. All right, I got up to his neck. I'm going to click again. It's not really grabbing there, so I'm going to cut my losses and complete this selection. All right, we're almost there. We sort of got a lot of it done. Down here, I don't see a lot of high contrast, and even worse in the grass. So what I'm going to do is just use the polygonal lasso tool instead. So I'm going to hold Shift, click the left mouse. I'm adding now, and I'm going to go ahead and do. This is probably the tool I use the most when I'm doing selections. The polygonal lasso tool. So I'm just going to sort of guesstimate this, because we're probably going to have to flatten out this guy's butt anyway to make it look sort of reasonable, like he's sitting on the stoop there. All right, so I've added this selection. There we go. And how about the rest of this head? I think we can use the magnetic lasso tool. So I'm going to go back to the magnetic lasso tool, click Shift, and let it take us away. All right. All right. There it is. So we have our person. I'm going to use this opportunity to show you a couple more features or functions of the selection tools. So let's say I wanted to shrink in some way the selection I had made. I could go up here to select, modify, and I could expand or contract the selection. So let's say I go to contract. I want to shrink the selection. I'm going to say, I don't know, let's do 10 pixels. It will shrink all the selection by however many pixels I've decided to use. What if I wanted to use put a little bit of a border around what I've selected, or anyway add a little bit of the context? I could go to expand. Alternatively, okay, we set 15 pixels, and that will move the selection outwards. And we're going to be using that a little later. For now, I want to cut out the image here of this person sitting. So I'm going to Control C since I have it selected. I'm going to go to my gated door here, looking out onto space. I'm going to click Control V, so I'm pasting into place. And I need to absolutely scale this guy down because he's ginormous. So I'm going to click Control T. And I'm going to scale him here. Put him just there on the edge. We have a little bit of a dilemma. It's nice that he's, in the way that he's sitting, I think the scale is working out just fine. It sort of looks reasonable with respect to the door, but I want him to be in front of the door layer after all. So I'm going to move this layer up. And I've neglected to label all these layers while I've been working, which often happens. So I'm going to say man sitting. I'm going to relabel some of these. Space, and then gate. Well, one of the things I don't like about this image already is that there isn't a high enough contrast between the person sitting and the galaxy in the background. So I'm going to go to space, layer. I've selected the space layer on the right side. We have to be conscious of the layers we're using now because there's so many of them. So we want to make sure we understand which is selected before we start to make changes. I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments. Again, this is for the space layer. And I'm going to go to Brightness and Contrast. So that's going to bring this bar up for me, and that in this way I can change how bright and contrasting the elements are in that particular image. So what I think I want to do here is really brighten this up. Let's make it quite a bright one, and I'm going to click OK, and that'll save my changes. And I also want to darken up the person sitting. So let's go to, where were we? At Image, Adjustments, and Brightness Contrast, and I'm going to darken this person here. So let's do, yeah, I think that's good enough. So the man sitting, I think, doesn't look too bad. I think it's all right. Looking out over through the door to space, that's kind of epic. What about adding a rocket out in space? Oh, there's a rocket. I'm opening up a new file now. Okay, here's a rocket launch in space. I think probably the easiest thing to do in this case to get this rocket with its flames out of this original image is to use a new selection tool, the magic wand. Ooh, so the magic wand tool, I'm going to select it, and what it will allow me to do is if I click on a color in the image or click on a pixel, it will select all of the like pixels that are connected to it, let's say. So Up here in the top, I have all the options for this particular selection tool, and you can play with toggling these. If I were to, let's say, not have all the material contiguously selected, then wherever I click on the blue, it will select everywhere in the image blue. I'm going to explain this a little bit later in another one of these quick tutorials. For now, what I want to do is just select all of the stuff around the rocket and around that fireball that's coming out the back. Well, you can see that it hasn't selected some of these other stuff, and I'm going to help with that. First of all, I'm going to help by, if I hold Shift with the magic wand tool activated, and I click other colors, other pixels in the image, it will continue to add those colors, those additional pixels from throughout the image to my selection. So the more I click sort of smoky stuff, it will keep adding like information to my selection. For me, that's close enough. I didn't want this smoke trail anyway. Who needs it? So I'm just going to go ahead and select it. You'll notice I'm selecting everything but the rocket and the flame. And why would that be, I wonder? Very mysterious. So let's go to the polygonal tool to clean up some of this stuff. I'm selecting everything but the rocket and the fire. All right, let's get some of this stuff out of the way. All right. Okay, I'm trying to select all this these missing things. Now we have everything. Excuse me. Now we have everything selected except the rocket and the fire. I'm going to go to Select, Inverse. We talked about this before. This is our option for inverting what the selection is, and now I have the rocket selected. So let's do Control C or Edit, Copy the selection. I'm going to go back to our original file. I'm going to do Control V or Paste, Edit, Paste. Oops, paste here. Control V. And there is our rocket. I'm going to do Control T, which is transform. We could find that Edit, Transform. Well, edit. Let's do Free Transform for now. There are other ways of doing transformations. Free Transform. And until now, I've been scaling things and moving them only. So let's scale it maybe in an interesting way. Another thing we could do is rotate. So you'll notice that around the corners here, if I put my cursor right over the corner, it'll give me the option to drag the corner and scale this thing up. But if I move my mouse slightly away from the corner, it'll give me this curved arrow, which enables me to do a rotation. So I kind of want, the guy looks like he's looking sort of to the left. So I'm guessing that there might be, let's say, a rocket like moving to the left. All right, so there's the rocket flying out of frame. And the last thing I'm going to add to this image is a street sign, just to be a bit funny. Let's try to make our own street sign. So here's a street sign. Your text here. Okay. What do I do with this? First of all, I want to locate this street sign somewhere in the original image. So I'm thinking of putting the street sign, somewhere up here in the top left-hand corner. So again, we want to select the street sign and relocate it. So let's use the magic wand tool. We'll do a selection of all the exterior stuff that we don't want in the image. And then I'm going to go up to my selection tool. I'm going to click inverse. So that'll give me just the sign and that little bit of shadow, which is fine. Control C. So edit copy. I'm going to go to the door and I'm going to click Control V. All right, there's my sign. We haven't been labeling these again. Let's do street sign. And then which layer was this? If I don't know what a layer is, my preferred way of figuring it out is just toggling its visibility on and off. Okay, so this is the rocket. So I'm going to title this rocket. And somehow I think it'd be more interesting if there were multiple of these. So I'm going to duplicate layer again. Yeah, you thought it was a tutorial. Actually, it's art in action. All right, where's my third rocket? There it is. Oops, third rocket. Oh, I see. I copied it there. All right. Well, even more interesting now. Lots of stuff going on in this image. Where were we? The street sign. So what I'm going to do with this street sign, first of all, I'm going to scale it up. So I'm going to click Control T. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And we have a bit of a problem because it says your text here, and we don't really want it to say your text here. We want it to call it, some other street. So I'm going to zoom in. By the way, the zoom tool, which you can access by clicking Z on the keyboard, is this little magnifying glass. If I click the magnifying glass, the default is to zoom you in. If I want to zoom out, I hold Alt, and it will give me a negative magnifying glass and allow me to zoom out. So there I am, zooming in and zooming out. Not holding Alt, holding Alt. So what I don't like about this layer, which is the street sign, we're on the street sign now, is that it has your text here, whereas we want to put in our own text. Well, because this is a raster program, all this information is in pixels, so we can't edit it like we would text, the text that we're going to write, and we need to get rid of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the clone stamp tool on this layer. The way the clone stamp tool works is that you, if you hold Alt, it will identify a piece of the image or the layer that you're on, and it will paint exactly that point onto another part of the image. So I'll give you a demonstration. It's easier that way. So what I want to do is take this green space that exists here and put it over top of all the rest. I want to paint this whole thing green. So I'm holding Alt. I'm telling the this tool we're going to use this green from top to bottom. So I'm holding Alt. I'm clicking here. I just clicked. And now if I start to paint using the clone stamp tool, where you see that cross where I had clicked Alt, where I had left clicked while holding Alt before to tell it to paint from there, that's where it's bringing information from to put over top of this E. Now if I continue though, it will remember that the E was there. Hold on, I'll show you in a second. And it will start to paint the E. Ooh. Well, I don't want that. I want this whole thing green. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to hold Alt to reset where I want it to paint from. So So I'm holding Alt right now, and I'm clicking the left mouse button. Bop. So I reset the green to there. It's a bit slow with this size of a circle. So I'm going to go up to my options here where I can affect the way that these tools work. And I'm going to make the size of the circle a bit bigger to help me out. So that's pretty good. That'll help me get done faster. All right. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing again. Alt, click on the left. Alt, left click. Alt, left click, and that'll finish us up here. Super. So now I want to put in my own text. There's a type tool in our amongst our tools. You can also just click T, and this will allow me to start to type. Oops, give me a sec. Let's go back and try that again. Type tool. I'm going to click. Oh, sorry. I'm going to click and drag. It's what I wanted to do. And I'm going to start typing anything in here. And it looks like the text is too big to be seen. You can adjust, as I said, for the tools, the different aspects of the tool in the top, just below your file, edit, image, etc., just below the menu bar. So I'm gonna, let's say, make it a bit smaller. Let's see what 16 point does. That's quite reasonable. First of all, let's figure out what we want this to say. Let's say this is space door drive. All right. So 16-point font is a bit small for this, and we don't want it to be black, we want it to be white. So I'm going to highlight the text here, click on the color, this color icon. Again, these are all the options we have for adjusting the details of this tool. I'm going to move my color up to white. All right, that works for me. I'm going to change the font type. What do I want exactly? Let's do maybe a Myriad Pro. That's kind of boring. Let's do Myriad Pro. And we probably want a bold. So let's go to bold here. Yeah, that looks good. I'm going to up the font size to 30. Is that good? No, we want to go a little higher. 48. That takes us too far, so I'm going to enter in it manually. Let's try 45. Nope, that's not small enough. Let's do 40. Oops, 40. That looks like it works a bit better. Now I've clicked out of the type tool. So at one point I had the type tool selected. If I click the move tool, it will automatically take me out of the type tool, and it will allow me to basically manipulate this type as an object. It's not a conventional layer, it's text, so that you can edit it not as a raster image. And you can see that differentiation here in the layers with this T. If I want to go back to this as a type tool, I can if I want to go back to editing this text, I can either click the text tool and then click on the text itself, or I can click T and then click on the text. So it's the same thing here. You click this option or you click T, and then you can edit the text directly. I actually don't want to edit the text directly anymore. It says what I want it to say, so I'm going to click Control T, and I'm going to manipulate the size of this thing to get it just the way I want it. I don't want it to scale up evenly because I kind of want to change how this fits into the sign. I want it to fit more exactly. So I'm holding Shift now so it's not scaling proportionally. And that looks good to me. I'm going to click enter so it saves my transformation. And I'm going to zoom out and see what we've got. Let's see how we're doing. Space door drive. How exciting. Excellent. Well, basically this concludes the first tutorial. I'm going to save this image out so we can include it in our presentation. This is Space Door. All right, she's a good one. And I'm going to stop this tutorial now, and you can find me again in the next one. We'll do a slightly more complex variation of photoshopping. Thanks for watching.